It's time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, some good news I came across today, and I'm hoping this is right. I'm hoping we're finally going to start cracking down on the Chinese dumping solar panels here into the U.S. and maybe build our own solar panels. So, like I've been saying for years, domestic production for domestic consumption. We build it here, we use it here, we buy it here, we create the jobs here. It sounds like a great idea to me. So when I saw Sherrod Brown say it's official, Chinese-made solar panels have been cheating American trade laws for almost a decade. Ohio solar manufacturers and workers are poised to lead this industry. He says, I'll never stop fighting for a level playing field so they can compete. Why I love Sherrod Brown, and here to share some thoughts on, well, are we actually going to take them on, or is this window dressing? I've asked our good friend Scott Paul to come talk with us. Scott is the president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing, AmericanManufacturing.org, the website, if you want to check out the work that they do. Scott, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, great to be with you.
So
I agree with you on Sherrod Brown, man. Great guy. Great guy.
What am I getting out of this? Are we finally going to take on this dumping? Are we finally going to take this cheating on?
Yeah. Well, the answer is eventually. All right. And this is the frustrating thing. So this solar saga has played out over a long time. There were some tariffs that were put into place back in the Obama administration directly on China, and then the Trump administration as well. And then these companies that make the solar panels in China figured a way around. They said, well, we're going to send some of the stuff to Malaysia, to Vietnam, to some other countries to what is called circumvent those tariffs. And so this case that Sherrod Brown's talking about was called a circumvention case, designed to crack down on these pass-through Chinese imports that are now coming through countries like Vietnam and Malaysia. And the Commerce Department said, yes, indeed, this is happening, with very few exceptions. And there will be tariffs, in some case, big tariffs, put into place. The hitch is this, that the Biden administration announced last year a moratorium on new tariffs on solar until basically the middle of next year, because all the solar developers were saying there's not enough production in the United States of America and the market will dry up. So please let us have this last fix of imports.
This last fix. I like the way you put that.
This last fix of imports before we actually have to buy American. And there's big incentives to do that. But there's a lot to unpack here. But that's the essence of the case, Rick. Yeah.
I mean, the capacity question is a very real one. And it comes back to this, had we not had all of the obstruction and all of the attacks on the attempt of the Obama administration to get us some production domestically, I don't know that maybe we're not in this position.
Yeah, that's 100% right. And what we've seen, I think, is that even with this deferred action and the incentives in the Inflation Reduction Act, the clean energy incentives, and there's big ones. There's something called Section 45X, which basically covers a lot of the cost of capital of building a new solar factory in the United States. Okay, so this has led a bunch of companies, including some of the companies that had been making them in China or these other countries, to say, we're going to locate production in the United States of America. And we've seen announcements in Ohio, and we've seen them in Texas, and we've seen them in Georgia, and we've seen them on the West Coast, and we've seen them, I think, even in New York. But there's been a lot of solar plant announcements that have come about. And so these factories are trying to scale up. And I will say many of them are trying to do it the right way by having an ethical domestic supply chain from start to finish, because there's still a lot of unanswered questions, because polysilicon, one of the major ingredients basically that goes into solar manufacturing, by and large comes from Xinjiang or China. Wafers, which are part of the solar manufacturing process that can be turned into solar modules, they slipped through this trade enforcement thing, and so we still might have an issue with them. And so this hasn't solved the problem, but at least we're stepping in the right direction, and we are building that capacity in the United States. Right. I personally think the Biden administration should speed up the end of that moratorium. I mean, I suppose I have mixed feelings about the logic of all of this, but I do think that the capacity in the United States is scaling up dramatically, and we can start turning up the volume on those tariffs in a way before the middle of next year, and I think that will help to boost solar manufacturing in the United States even further than it is right now.
What do you say to the person, because I know this is one of the industry talking points, well, we're just not scaling up fast enough because we don't have the workers to build the new facilities. We would love to do all those wonderful things that you're talking about, Mr. Paul, but we just don't have the ability, because all of the other building is happening. Because I don't know if you've noticed, we're in the middle of a manufacturing boom. Lots of jobs being created, lots of facilities being built, lots of people working, doing that kind of stuff.
Yeah. You're right. There is a lot of this, and there is a help wanted sign out every construction site, every manufacturing facility. They have one of these. But the difference is, once people discover these opportunities, and as you know, Rick, these jobs need a little more training than working in fast food. And I say that with respect because I started in a Dairy Queen, right? And you did have to have a little bit of training, but it was about a day, as opposed to maybe complete a welding course or an electrician's course or something like that. This is going to take a little longer. And so I think that with the wages in manufacturing, which are higher than they are in the service sector, that you'll be able to scale this stuff up. I don't think there's any question about that. But the industry, and this is the interesting thing, the industry association, I'm just going to admit I don't like them at all. They said they questioned the validity even of this decision, right? They were saying, well, this is just this circumvention is just, it was wrong to put these tariffs on, even if they're going to be deferred. And so that's the thing that burns me, because they know exactly what's happening here, is that these solar installers and developers were making some serious bank, some real margins, because they were bringing in this dump product, and they had it, and now they're getting called on it, right? As you should, as you should. If you are cheating, if you're bringing in products that are subsidized or dumped at the expense or harm of American industry, then you gotta punish that somehow. And that's what's happening here. And so the idea that there wouldn't be consequences to this, I think that's the thing that really annoys me about the industry's stance more than anything else. Because the workers, we will find them. They will be there. And we know this, workers flock to good jobs. So, if the plant is organized, there's a really good chance that they're going to be able to staff up in a hurry. If the plant is paying good wages, same thing. They're going to be able to staff up in a hurry.
No, that's the important part of this. I mean, if we're going to be spending all this money, and this is where my mindset has always been, if we're going to be investing all of this money, all this resource, all of this into the new technologies, into greener economy, we should be benefiting from that. It should not be something that the Chinese are getting. Now, the argument that I get most often is, well, the Chinese can do it so much cheaper, so we can do so much more. What do you say to that?
Yeah, I think in the long run, that is a self-defeating argument for a couple of different reasons. We have depended on China for a lot of things, and how has that worked out for us as a country, right? With respect to medicine or a lot of other things. We've run into shortages, we've run into quality problems. Ultimately, you get what you pay for, okay? So that's number one. I think number two is that we have an issue with respect to supply chains and the ethics of those supply chains, and also compliance with the law. We have a law in place called the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act, which basically says we're presuming goods that are coming from that region of China are made with forced or slave labor, because many of them are. And there's no way to really independently verify that they aren't, because you can't get access to those countries, to those factories. But we know, based on eyewitness accounts and other accounts, that the slave labor is happening. And so it is against the law, probably, to bring a lot of this stuff in. And so that's problematic, because those supply chains are horribly unethical. And then finally, you lose public support. I mean, the reason why all this stuff passed is because there was a made in America component to it. And let's be honest here. I mean, I believe climate change is real. I want to make progress on it. Not everyone feels that way, particularly on, in a lot of, rural parts of the country. I'm just going to say it. But something that's very compelling is that, you know what? I'm for any American energy source, as long as it creates American jobs and is going to bring down the price of my electricity. And that's exactly what the solar incentives combined with the tariffs are going to do once we are fully scaled up in a couple of years here.
No, I mean, for me, the idea, look, I'm with you. I agree climate change is real, something we do have to address. But even if you don't, the idea of moving away from dirty stuff, from stuff that we have to get from foreign countries, and just a way to get off the grid so that you could be somewhat independent. This is the weird thing for me. Conservatives always talk about, being, independent, getting away from government, getting away from, and yet one of the ways that you could be completely energy independent is move towards solar, move towards geothermal, move towards every home in this country being built completely off the grid with the new technologies that would afford you the ability to do that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And simply trading like made in China solar panels instead of like Middle Eastern oil still gets you in a geopolitical mess, just like we've seen with these tariffs, by the way, because it limits your options. And if we are able to do that clean energy manufacturing in the United States, deploy it in the United States, it's ultimately, yes, going to help with respect to climate change, but it's also going to help with respect to jobs. And as you pointed out, Rick, with respect to energy independence, which is something that I think most Americans strongly support.
It just seems weird that it's become a political red hat, blue hat issue when it should just be. I go back to when we put solar panels on our house. My son was, he was just a little, he was a couple years old when that happened, and he asked the simple question: why aren't they everywhere? Why aren't they on the roof of the school or the Walmart or the supermarket? Why don't we have these everywhere, Dad? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm hoping we get there. But that was 2012, 11, 12.
Yeah. It's well, look, we're getting there. And I think that again, the combination of these tariffs and the investments and the made in America aspects of this, by every analysis, they have really pushed forward the implementation of renewable energy like solar panels and wind turbines. And they're increasing exponentially. I mean, if you look at any of the charts, and I'm sure you have, of this stuff, I mean, it's just like a slope that goes straight up, since the Inflation Reduction Act. It's remarkable. And so we will, you may not see a lot of them in the neighborhood necessarily, but you can bank on the fact that utilities are installing these. And there are big incentives for companies to install these in large spaces too. But they're being deployed rapidly all over the country. The energy mix is changing. I mean, I saw something that I thought was really ironic. Tulsa, one of the hearts of the American oil industry. In fact, their local baseball team's called the Drillers. Tulsa now gets 25% of its electricity through renewable sources, through solar and wind. And most people don't see that, except for it's coming in cheaper and it's renewable. Yeah. And so what's not to like about it?
And what's not to like? I'm right there with you. Finally, I got to get your thoughts on this Goldman Sachs report. Yeah. I know there's a manufacturing boom. I know we keep talking about it, but when Goldman Sachs says, hey, Biden and his policies are going to create 250,000 jobs over the next 2 years,
Yeah.
I can't say I can't steal the Biden line, but this is kind of a BFD.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. When the investment banks are actually bullish on American manufacturing, it must be real, I guess, something like that. So and they were the first ones to escort American business offshore too. And so I think that they do see an opportunity. And I think that that's a pretty good number. That doesn't mean there's not going to be churn in other parts of the industry. And we know, particularly not necessarily with respect to solar and wind, but overall within the energy sector, overall within the transportation sector, there are going to be adjustments because it's not the same process to make a combustion engine as it is an EV. There's just less parts in an electric vehicle, right? Less manufacturing. Same thing with respect to offshore drilling or wind turbines. It's just that the offshore drilling jobs right now pay very well. Some of them are unionized. There's a big union footprint in all of that. And so we need the same thing in renewables to make sure that there is that just transition. These are important issues we have to deal with, but I am bullish on the possibilities for American manufacturing, just like Goldman Sachs, and I don't say that very often.
Yeah, that's a sentence it doesn't come off your lips very easy. That's kind of hard to get out, isn't it? It's like when the Chamber of Commerce does something I agree with. It's really hard to let that out.
Yeah, but it is the objective truth, which is awesome. And so no matter what, some of the Fox News or the Republicans or what, it's happening. And if you look around, you can see it happening if you go to any part of the country right now. So it is real. It's happening. It is there. Yeah. And, and even the investment bankers see it for what
look, I saw Biden's infrastructure bill. I saw firsthand a lot of his projects working as I was driving home from Connecticut over the weekend. A lot of construction on the way home from Bridgeport to central Pennsylvania. But hey, long term, going to be good stuff. But Scott,
amen.
As always, I appreciate the time, the good news, and I'm glad it's good news. But I appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
Of course, Rick. Great to be with you tonight.
Our good friend Scott Paul. Make sure you check out their website, AmericanManufacturing.org. We'll get links out on social media how you can do that. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
From the steel mills of Pennsylvania to the auto factories of Michigan to the modern makers movement, manufacturing makes our nation great. I'm Scott Paul, president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. We bring business and labor together to advocate for policies that everyone can agree on. Together, we can strengthen manufacturing and create good-paying American jobs. Help us keep it made in America.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
The old factory towns in America's heartland have been taking a beating. Thing is, though, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Unions are making a comeback. More organizing in the last couple of years than in a long time. And the Biden administration being more supportive of unions than any president since FDR. We're finally turning things around after 40 years of screwing over working people. But will we keep moving in the right direction? That's our choice as Americans.
The best way to strengthen America's economy? How about investing in America's fastest growing industry? Clean energy. It means millions of jobs that pay well and can't be outsourced. And lower utility costs for families. Congress, let's get it done.
So, Donald Trump has evidently a universal, what is this, a universal basic tariff or something along this line is what they're putting forth. Universal baseline tariff is what they're working on, and this is one of those weird kind of moments where I think back to when he won in 2016, And I remember saying at the time, if he sticks to what he ran on, if he sticks to, hey, we're going to rebuild manufacturing, we're going to bring those union jobs back, we're going to rebuild our infrastructure. Because if you remember, he was talking about $3 trillion in infrastructure spending. $3 trillion. And if he'd stuck to the trade deficit, he'd have stuck to that instead of all of the insanity and all the craziness and all the criming and all the, the perfect phone calls and the nonsense. He would have been reelected hands down. He would have been, had he moved in the direction that Biden is now taking us, which again is what Bernie Sanders was moving us towards. Had he done that, he'd have been unbeatable. But here he is now, probably going to go to jail. But here's the thing. Evidently, they had a big powwow last week with Larry Kudlow, Brooke Rollins, and Stephen Moore and Newt Gingrich. 3 of those people, you put them in a room together, nothing but bad ideas come out of it. And most of the problems we have today go back to their ideas. Just my thought. I guess we got Alice again? Alice, what's up?
Aren't you lucky you get me twice tonight?
Look at that.
But I called back because I've been wanting to tell you for 2 weeks, and I always forget once we hang up.
Uh-oh.
My friend and I were coming back from West Virginia 2 weeks ago, and we were coming the back way, and once we hit the Pennsylvania side, there is a power plant there, First Energy. And about 25 years ago, they put the power plant up, and they bought the land on both sides of the road for, I don't know, about 2 miles, 3 miles. When we were coming back, they were putting up solar panels, acres and acres of solar panels.
Yep.
So I forgot to tell you that. So I'm going to assume that they were getting some sort of government, funding to do that. So that's what I wanted to tell you.
No, I appreciate it, Alex. No, that's good stuff. No, I mean, the reality is that this is what happens when you have a smart policy. When you say we're going to, as a matter of the country, this is where we're going to go, and we're going to incentivize it, which is why I'm not opposed to the idea of incentives. I've said for years, I want to have a really high tax rate, especially on rich people and on corporate America, and then we incentivize behavior that we want and need, as we've done in the past. And, successfully in some cases. Reagan forward, not so much. But this is one of these moments where you go, there's an opportunity here. There is an opportunity to do some smart stuff. The question is, will we? And this is where my problem, I keep coming back to this will we moment. Will we do what's in the best interest of the future of this country? For instance, there's a story right now. U.S. Steel, iconic U.S. Steel, was the first billion-dollar corporation on this planet. In fact, it was one of the 2 corporations, them and Ohio, the big Rockefeller and the big gas company. They were the reason for the antitrust laws because they were so big, and well. The story right now going on is that they're up on the chopping block. 2 companies, Cleveland Cliff and this, SK or whatever I think it is I'm not even sure how you say that. But you've got these 2 companies that are now going to be bidding for it. One owned by basically a hedge fund. The other one, as I understand, a good union company that wants to run it in a way that's going to, to keep jobs and do all of the things that we want to do. And it got me to thinking about, where we are in this moment, where for the last 40 years, what's happened is you see these iconic companies, who are still profitable, and they are being, bought up, chopped up, sold off for short-term profit. And the workers are the ones who end up getting screwed. Do you really think that the workers at U.S. Steel, if they had control of the board, even not the company, but they were on the board, do you think they'd be okay with selling off to a company that was just going to chop them up for pieces? No, of course not. Do you think they'd be okay with a lot of the decisions that have been made over the last 100 years? No, not so much. And this is where, I keep coming back to workers need to have a voice in the workplace. And the steel workers are weighing in heavily on this, saying, look, you sell off to Cleveland Cliffs, we're good with this. But the other direction, it's bad for everybody. We don't have a top 10 steel maker in this country. Not one. Do you think that's a problem? Because I do. Want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Back after this.
I've been driving buses for 5 years, and my day-to-day routine is I wake up a little earlier than most people. I get on a bus, I go out, I pick up some students and make sure they get to school nice and safe. Here in Fairbanks, Alaska, that can be a challenge because of the winter weather and the icy roads. But I love the job. So the Teamsters are great. They provide us a lot of protections. They've always taken care of their people, made sure that our jobs were secure. We didn't have to worry about whether or not we'd have a job from day to day.
And that's amazing because before we'd be working 4, 6, 8 hours a day and only earning minimum wage. Was real difficult to make a living. And then the Teamsters pushed a lot, so we make something we can live off of and not have to have a second job. What absolutely gives me peace of mind, the union membership allows me to focus on this job without having to worry about whether or not my family is going to be taken care of. I'm Andrew Case, and I'm proud to be Teamsters Local 959.
Before we close the program, we want to take a moment to thank our viewers and to share a little bit about why we do what we do. At The Rick Smith Show, we believe that media today is almost entirely controlled by corporate greed. So we have now 24-hour news channels. But instead of 24 hours of news, what we get is 1 hour repeated 24 times, and with tons of commercials creating obscene amounts of profits. Information once presented as a public service has now become a private commodity. So when lies make money, lies are what we get. We get a corporate-controlled rage machine feeding us anger and hate, trying to convince us that our problems are right-left or red-blue, when they are and always have been up-down, the wealthiest 1% versus the rest of us. Our goal is to be an alternative to that machine, not as a news show with a fancy journalist out front, but as a talk show run by a union truck driver and a team of working-class heroes just like you. Everything we do, both what we get right and what we get wrong, is dedicated to advancing the interests of America's working families. No corporate ad buys, no think tanks, no focus groups, no talking points. We are media by working people for working people. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you back here next time.